What is going on, guys? This is Garrett Williams, another episode of Second Guessing with Stressing. Today, I'm joined by special guest Jeremy Chugs from Chat Sports. Welcome, Jeremy. How are you doing today?
I'm feeling great. It's only negative 10 degrees outside, so not too bad, but I'm ready to talk some ball. We have everything ahead of us. We have draft, free agency, we have everything, Stressing. We have everything ahead of us.
Yeah, so it's kind of funny, like when you get into the content creation side, like obviously the season's busy, but like you would think that you kind of have a second to catch your breath, but it's almost even busier like right after with like you just mentioned free agency and drafts. It's definitely an exciting time if you're like a big
Oh yeah.
fan. It's a never ending clock, and I love it, something to keep you occupied. So, but yeah, we got a couple comments coming in right off the bat. Shout out Caesar, and then we got Unknown says you're best two Houston Texans content creators. Appreciate that. But yeah, so basically what I've been doing, Jeremy, is like I've kind of done the show before in the fall, but now in the spring, I'm kind of making it a point to bring on other local Houston journalists, reporters, content creators. And like the main thing is for me and for us fans to get to know you guys. So with that being said, if you don't mind just kind of giving us a brief background of, however vague or detailed you want to make it, personal or not, but specifically how you do what you do with the Texans coverage.
No, for sure, for sure. So I actually born and raised, grew up in Houston. Went to shout out Clear Lake, went to Clear Lake Elementary, intermediate, high school. Then I graduated, went to University of North Texas, where I studied broadcast journalism for 4 years, and then now I currently work at Chat Sports, which is a content creation just factory. We have channels. If you have Raider fans, Cowboy fans, whatever, any kind of fan, friend, or family member you have, we probably have a channel for them. And I am lucky enough to run the best one out of them all, our Texans channel. Just because obviously they're the best team in the NFL. They got unfairly taken out by the refs this year, but the Texans, we all know Texans are the best team in the NFL.
Yeah, I mean it's definitely exciting times, and I've enjoyed watching your content. I think you guys do a great job, especially like you said, the off season is your coverage now has been awesome. But yeah, I mean, what more can you ask for with the team with the future that we have? So, with that being said, let's just kind of talk about like what's on everybody's minds right now is free agency. I know you've made some videos of some guys that you want to target. I guess we'll kind of start like from a high level view and kind of work down, but what would you say are the Texans' biggest needs at what positions?
I would say the biggest needs as of right now. I mean, I think number one is obvious, and normally you don't have a fan base that agrees like 90%, 95% on one thing. I think if you poll Texans fans right now, it would be close to 90% are going to say O-line, right? Like everybody, it's not a secret. The O-line stunk last year. We all saw CJ Stroud, on his backside half the time. O-line has to be number one. Next, I would say probably receiver, because Tank Dell probably won't play for this next season. So you have Nico Collins and then Metch and X, which is like, that's a whole nother thing with those two guys of like, and it's like, that's another thing with like Texans fandom is like, no other fan base sees John Mechie or Xavier Hutchinson as like that good of players. But Texans fans, I know you're probably like, dude, this is the year Metch is going to break out. This is the time he's going to do it. But I still think wide receivers need number two. And then I'm going to go vague. I think sneaky is secondary depth. So I did my video today on safeties, agent safeties the Texans could look at. But I think secondary depth, obviously you have the big three, that Kalen Bullock, Kamari Lassiter, Derek Stingley. But behind them, it's like kind of a ghost town. Like there's nobody that gives me any kind of faith.
Well, we saw it this year. Like when we had injuries, we had, Jeff Okuda, who was hoping to be, this and that, and Kadar Holman getting snaps. And then we had Miles Bryant running the nickel, who did good in the playoffs. But I mean, that is a good point. I feel like that's not being talked about a lot. What about interior D line? Is that a point for you as well?
It's going up there. I mean, if they keep Danico Autry, I like him at the 3 technique. I also think, we have Tim Settle under contract this next year. So having those two guys at least for the starters gives me a little bit of well-being. I've also been on the side of if the Texans wanted to release Danico Autry, make him a post-June first cut, and go out and take that money and try to re-sign Mario Edwards Jr. and Foley Fudakasi, I'd be there fine with that too as well, because I thought both those guys were awesome this past year. Like it's like everybody that D'Amico touched at defensive line this year turned into gold. Derek Barnett was awesome. Like every single person on the Texans D line was just awesome this year. So it's hard for me to like the offseason, like be like, oh yeah, I think D line's a need because they were so good last year. But you are missing, you are going to lose a couple guys if you don't re-sign Mario Edwards Jr., Derek Barnett, or Foley Fudakasi. But I could see how some people think like DT defensive tackle could be a need.
I mean, if you rewind a year ago, that was all of our like biggest need was a big defensive tackle. We all wanted Christian Wilkins and this and that, and we didn't get him, and we didn't get any free agent, and we all now in the draft we're going to get a D tackle, and we never did. And we're all thinking that D'Amico is an idiot, and he signs all these no name, non big signings, and to your point, they all play great. So I think like that's something for us to kind of keep in mind this offseason is D'Amico Ryans has a scheme and a system that can find players that are overlooked, and he can, accentuate their skill sets that align with that, and we can kind of get maximum value. So I kind of have like that overarching philosophy when it comes to the draft. Like I feel like we can get more value later out of defensive picks, and we should probably prioritize offense first. But you brought up a good point with the Danico Autry. I actually posted a tweet on that earlier from PFF. They kind of recommended that as a cut. Can you kind of dive in more? I forget the numbers. I don't know if you know, but like I think his salary was like 10 million, but then they say you can get another reserve edge for like 5 million.
So with his contract, just because I've put it out there, I made a trade video a couple weeks ago of like guys you could trade to save some money. He was on that video, and then also I talked about him as like a potential cut guy of like you could save money if you trade him or cut him. Obviously, you hope to trade him because you also get draft capital back. But if you make him a post June 1st cut, I believe the numbers are you save 9 million from the cap this year, and then you can spread that dead money between 2025 and 2026. So it's like 1.5 in 2025. I think it's like 2.5 in 2026, but not a lot. And you get that extra. That's why I keep on saying like if you do that, you get basically in essence like $7 million to play with from cutting him. And I feel like you could easily re-sign Mario Edwards Jr. and or Foley Fudakasi for that $7 million because Foley made $4 million last year. He was injured a ton, so you could probably get him a little cheaper. Mario Edwards Jr. had a really good year. I don't know what his market value is, but I don't think it could be more than like $4 or $5 million.
Yeah, and I think too, what people aren't like that don't follow our team like we do and that are pro cut Danico Autry just looking at numbers. Like I don't think they realize that he also plays defensive tackle for us. So the versatility is something to keep in mind. And then also PFF. I tend to like PFF grades more than most people, but I do acknowledge that they may not always be correct. And I think specifically to the Texans, I feel like they may have a lapse there with our defensive linemen because I feel like they play is meant to be a way to make them look bad. But as far as the Texans are concerned, they're doing their job, but they're probably, I mean, if you look at like the defensive line grades, especially like the interior, they're taught just to attack. And you look at the grades, like they all, like from us watching this season, like they were awesome, right? You go look at the grades and the grades say otherwise. So, they're probably looking through that lens as well.
Yeah, and PFF does a good job with, I love them for O-line grades. A lot, but sometimes as a fan, I do wonder as well because like I'll go and I'll be like, oh, this guy had a 2-sack game, and I'll have like, oh yeah, he got a 55 overall PFF grade for that game. I'm like, dude, how is that even possible? How do you get 2 sacks in a game and somebody goes 55 out of 100? Like that just blows my mind. But yeah, I could see I also see the versatility in Danico Autry, and I get why you like people would want to keep him. Like I get that because he's a good player, and like I just
And Casario's high on him too. He called him a junkyard dog and all that
yeah.
stuff. And then there's also the fact that like we didn't get him for a full year because he was suspended, right, for the PED suspension. So I mean, that's thing too, like you never got the potential of what he could have been in this scheme. So that's part of it as well.
That's true. That's true. My only thing is, and you said it earlier, was like I feel like D'Amico and this coaching staff is so doggone good that if like what he can do with Foley Fotokasi and what he could do with those
Tim
guys,
Settle,
like I feel like they could kind of not get the scraps, but like get these lower level free agent signings and make them just as good. Because Tim Settle had like 10 tackles for loss and 5 sacks this past year, and
he was awesome.
no, whenever he signed, I made a video about it, and like literally people were commenting. They're like, "Who cares? Like, who is this?" Like nobody cares about Tim Settle, and he low-key had a really good year.
Yeah, I mean, and that's like a lesson for us fans. Like, scheme does matter. So I mean, and that's like kind of what I preach. Like, whenever we turn over, like that first year when we had Slowick come in, we had old players like, hey, these old guys could fit differently now, and you could definitely use that argument on offense with Kaylee coming in. I know you mentioned Xavier Hutchinson and John Mechie. I mean, I don't feel super. Xavier Hutchinson to me is just a great backup X receiver. I don't think he'll be anything more than that. I think he played great in the Kansas City game. He stepped up and was forced to play the other outside receiver with Tank Dell being out. Mechie, I was like the one last year in that group where I was like, telling everybody, like, hey, give him time. And then later in the year, I started like, all right, bro, like, I don't know. So, I mean, I still have a little bit of hope left on Mechie.
Yeah.
I guess with that being said, like, do you think with Nick Caley coming in, is there like any players on our roster that underwhelmed last year that you feel might be better utilized this year with him and his scheme?
I mean, I feel like the easy answer would be tight end, right? He was a former tight end coach, worked with Gronk in New England, and then what he did with Tyler Higbee with the Rams. Higbee was like considered almost like a top 10 tight end for that season that he was with them, right? Like he was really good. So I could see him a sneaky guy, which I picked him as a sleeper, like going into this past season, and then obviously he got injured. But Brevin Jordan, I think, could low key be really nice with Nick Caley. Like he's a good overall player, very athletic. We see like the breakaway speed from that playoff game a couple years back up against the Browns. Like he's a weapon, and I'm excited to see because he had the whole year to recover. He was inside the facility, was still with the team, obviously signed that 1-year deal. I think he could be good. Texans 22. That's a good point. Dameon Pierce, I think he could benefit as well from, I mean, not only just the scheme, but also the fact that the O-line should be, we all hope is going to be better this next season. So if the O-line's better, that means the run game is going to be better. And I think the biggest one is CJ Stroud. He had a dip. He had a bad year. And I think Landry Locker said this a couple of weeks ago, and it's been stuck in my mind ever since, is that Bobby Slowick was never a position coach. He never had to lead a group of men. He was always like a good innovator, a good thinker, but he was never like a vocal, like bringing guys in the huddle, bringing guys together. And I think that's the difference that's going to be with Nick Caley. Because I think I'll continue to say I think Bobby Slowick's still going to be a good coach. He's an extremely smart coordinator and a smart person. But I think whenever you think of D'Amico, like when the defense is on the field, he's like fist bumping, hitting the ground, things are getting lit. And then you look over at Bobby Slowick, it's 4th and 6. CJ Stroud looks at him and he's like, nothing. Like he gives you nothing.
Yeah.
I think Nick Caley's going to bring something extra to that because he's been a position coach. He's worked with like tight ends and he's worked in different rooms and had to like actually interact with the players more. So I think Nick Caley and there was that report about CJ Stroud and Slowick getting in a fight with that.
I don't believe it one bit. I can't see it happening.
I think it's like, sometimes it's like, the telephone game, like small shred of truth. Like maybe there was a awkward moment.
Goes down the grapevine.
Yeah, it started off like he said something to him, and at the end they're like, yeah, he was screaming in his face.
He called him a bitch.
Yeah, he was pissed. I think it's like, somewhere in between those, like probably had some awkward disagreement moment, but I think Stroud and him couldn't connect. Like they couldn't get together when things are tough. Like year one, you're a rookie. Like you're still kind of riding that high of like the offense. Like teams don't have tape on you. They don't know what to expect. The offense was kind of clicking. Guys were like playing really well his rookie season. So it wasn't like more on display. But then year two, there's struggles, things are happening. And then it just seemed like even though they said the connections was well, and that's what they're gonna say because they're professionals, they're not gonna air out any dirty laundry or anything. I think it was like you could tell like the vibes were off.
Yeah. Well, that's awkward for CJ Stroud too. Like he's only in his second year, and if he feels like he sees something wrong, like he doesn't want to like act like he's too egotistical to say like, "Hey, this guy sucks," or like. So
Yeah.
he kind of like probably had a tough position of between like speaking up but not being disrespectful, and
Mhm.
I think it worked out in the end. But that's a good point you brought up. Like, and I speculated that too, like him not being a position coach, but like my biggest thing was like when the O line struggled and the way they struggled, it was these pressures that we were giving up off of stunts
Mhm.
and blitzes and simulated blitzes, like simple stuff like this, games like that, any basic lineman can do. To me, it screamed coaching, and it screamed, or then also like on that same level is like the discipline aspect for the O line, like the false starts and the illegal procedures and
Mhm.
all that stuff before pre-snap. To me, that screamed lack of discipline. Like I get D'Amico Ryans is responsible overall, but like at a certain point too, you got to be able to delegate and you got to handle your own unit. And I don't like. I went back and thought like, could I imagine Bobby Slowick yelling at Laramie Tunsil? Like, F no. Like so,
No.
like so that was the crux of it for me. Was like,
Mhm.
yeah, no wonder these guys are doing it. They don't respect him, and he's probably not. And that's okay. That's fine. That's his personality. But like, that's what's crazy to me too is like when a lot of people see a great OC and they want to make him a head coach. Like now that same stuff we're talking about is like times 100. You're just assuming like these little nerds who are like introverts are going to go, lead a room full of like the biggest alphas in the world, bro. Like that's
Yeah.
not,
Oh
that's
yeah.
kind of an underrated thing.
And I was actually watching your live show, I think it was a week or two ago with Alexander, and
Hmm.
he was talking about, how if they didn't win that game before the bye up against the Jags, that Slowick was on the hot seat. Like he was like, might have not made it through the bye week. And I feel like, even though they like try to play it off like, oh no, like everything was good or whatever. Like I think like even like us Texans fans like knew like, oh dude, like if they don't win this game, like heads are rolling. And
Yeah.
like I don't think everybody in the chat sports office, everybody that I was talking with at work after they, ended up, firing Slowick or parting ways with Slowick, we're all like, wow, like I can't believe they made that decision. Like that's a wild decision. Like da da da. And I was like, honestly, if you ask Texans
That's
fans,
all non-Texans fans like were surprised by it.
yeah,
I
and
mean, I was surprised it happened, but I thought it was justified.
yeah, and like it was maybe a surprise, but it was not a shock. You were not like, oh, I can't believe they did that. Like all Texans fans were like, dang, like yeah, we probably saw that coming.
Well, I was like, my biggest takeaway was like I thought from everything we had seen up to this moment, and it's guessing, but D'Amico Ryans was too low coach. It's his
Mhm.
best friend. Like just made position roster moves like with players, showed the vets and this and that.
Mhm.
And then publicly too, like we dissect these press conferences like it means everything. He would do typical podium speak and never blame Bobby, always defended him. So I was
Mhm.
surprised, but my first takeaway was like, okay, like he's got what it takes. Like he just fired his best friend. He's not settling. He wants to go all the way. So like my first thought after that was like, okay, who's next? Like now he's gonna go cut players. Like so he's gonna fire his OC. Like he could have made a good argument to retain him. Like I don't
Mhm.
think that we should have, but I prepared myself as that would happen. So I guess that can kind of parlay question. I know I believe you had a video I watched earlier on this, but who are some potential cut candidates for us to clear some cap space? I know our cap space is pretty limited.
Yeah, it's gonna be a tough. I mean, I said it earlier, and where was this comment? I think it was Brandon Hallam. I'm not trying to start anything with anybody, but I do have to throw out Danico Autry's name. Um, and that the tough thing is the Texans don't have a lot of great cut candidates in terms of saving money because
Yeah.
like like Shaq Mason, Titus Howard, some of these guys that I see, like people who are like, yeah, should you cut them? Should the Texans cut these guys? It's like, dude, you eat like 15, 16 million dollars in dead cap by cutting these guys. Like, that's not nothing. Like, when you're already against the cap, like, you're not gonna pay a guy that much to not play for you. Like, you don't
It's
have
like
the
being upside down in a car. It's like you got to ride it out, man.
yeah, like exactly, exactly.
Equity, you know?
And I would say Danico Autry's one.
Mhm.
Dalton Schultz is another where it's like people are like, oh, we should cut Dalton Schultz. I think it's like $11 million in dead cap if you cut him. Now, like if you trade him, that's a different story. You're able to actually save a little bit of money, but the team has to take on, I think, a $14 million cap hit from Dalton Schultz this season. So
If we trade him, no
yeah,
matter what.
yeah. So
Really?
oh no, like the team taking on Dalton Schultz.
Oh,
Well,
gotcha, gotcha. Yeah, so they have to value I guess, but we could always buy that down a little bit too, I guess.
yeah, it's a tough move there with Schultz, even though I do think he's gonna have a little bit of a better year with Nick Haley as the OC. Another one that a lot of fans are mad at me about, and this is a divisive one, and I actually want to hear your thoughts on it.
Let's
You
hear
can
it.
save you can save $3 million by cutting Christian Harris at linebacker this
Oh,
season.
yeah, I saw that in her video. I mean, that's a good point. I mean, so what is like what's the risk reward as far as like cap and salary? Like, is
You you
how much would we save and how much any dead
it's
cap? It's just 3,000,000?
it's basically, so it's like you save like 3.2, and the dead cap, or the dead cap in 2025, I think, is like 200,000. It's like
Because
super
he's on his
low.
rookie contract.
Yeah, it's
And how
super
many
low.
years
So
are left on his contract?
he's a free agent after this year.
So, okay, so the timing would make sense. I mean, like to me, that's like one of the biggest mysteries that we haven't really dove into enough as Texans fans. I mean, like you talked about it in your video, like he came on late the previous year and had the big game against the Browns in the playoffs, and then this crazy mysterious injury, and we're playing this game all year of
Yeah.
when he's going to come back, and then he finally does come. Okay, he's not playing well. Okay, maybe he's still not healthy, and then it's like, all right, now it's 5 weeks. And like we kind of find out like he just got benched because he's not like Henry To'oTo'o is playing better. So
Yeah, he didn't play
I mean that's
against the
tough.
Chiefs in the playoffs, right? Like
Yeah.
what do you like? Obviously, another guy kind of in that same boat of Danico Autry of like, obviously you'd want to trade him so you can get some sort of
Yeah.
draft capital back. Like if a team's willing to, give a chance to Christian Harris, they like his tape, they like who he's been, I think that would make, some sense there. But I I I don't know.
It's tough. I mean, it's a good question. I mean,
and I'm a Christian Harris fan, so I'm
for
kind of
sure.
like
Yeah.
internally split on that because, dude, Harris County, that's like one of the most lit nicknames. Like you play for Houston.
That does the factor in it.
Oh, dude,
I agree.
you play in Houston. Your nickname is Harris County. Like
We need you to
the
be a Pro
shirts,
Bowler.
like, dude, like, I know you're all creative with the gear and stuff. I know you would have had some sick Harris County merch if he was going off this year, but you're not even thinking about it because you're like, dude, he didn't even play.
That's true. I guess I think there's the factor is I guess D'Amico seems to have a bond with him, but he's showing us that may not be a factor anymore. And he's like the linebacker whisperer. Maybe Henry To'oTo'o is just playing bass. And the tough part too is it's our system. We run a 4-2-5 as like a base defense with two linebackers, so
Mhm.
it's kind of a weird conundrum because you're like, oh, we only need two, but then you also need depth because when guys get hurt, you don't have depth. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, and then who knows? He may be unhappy too. Like if he
Mhm.
does become, a backup again next year, he's probably like, I want out of here. So like if it becomes to that point, then you might have to do something like that.
Yeah, I mean, there's two sides to the coin. Like either two bad things could happen from keeping him. Like you said, like he's a backup. He actually doesn't play well, and at the end of the year, he just leaves, and you don't have anybody to like that you're developing. He's going off somewhere else, so it's like kind of like a lost cause at that point. Or maybe he does come back, and if he does play really well, he's going into a contract year. So this offseason, you have a tough decision. Like, do we keep him, or because I believe you have Toto for another year past Christian Harris. So, and I thought Toto played pretty well this
He
past year.
did.
Obviously, he could be better in coverage, but yeah, I mean, I'm not saying it's an easy decision. It's a tough decision, and those are tough decisions. That's why Nick Caserio is getting paid the big bucks, because he's going to make those hard decisions on who to trade and cut and keep.
Well, let's just say Harris County comes back to what we know. Then now Henry gets the bump, and then like now you have a pretty good starting caliber linebacker on the bench. So like it's, I guess that would be the best situation, but it's still,
Yeah.
there's still a downside to each of it.
Yeah, I like, and I get, like, I see people's comments of like, Harris is still being developed, too much potential to cut for 3 million, and like I fully understand that. I get that side of it, but if you're looking to trim some of the fat and get some money, like that's an easy cut. Like if you don't feel confident in him, or you don't like, if you're leaning more to the side of like, I'm not sure if he's going to be a good player, like that's
And
an
then
easy.
you may be doing him a favor too. Like he may want that, Like I don't think people are talking about that. Like if he's unhappy with his role, like things can change. Like I know we all see the video of like where D'Amico told him to play, and then he did it, and he's on the sidelines hugging him. Like things change.
Mhm.
But yeah, we'll get to some of the questions in the chat. We're kind of just casual today. I guess it's a little different than the normal ones. We're super formal, but
Oh yeah,
I like the vibes here with
we're
Jeremy. We're
fat
kind of laid
chilling,
back, just
fat
we're kicking
chilling.
it. But I see a lot of talk about tight ends, and this is an interesting topic to me. At first I was thinking, I typically think, needs based, and I understand the best player available argument. And also we have to factor in it's early before free agency, so things will change. But we just talked about Dalton Schultz, how it doesn't make sense to cut him. So we can assume that the tight end room going in draft more than likely will be Dalton Schultz, Cade Stover, and Brevin Jordan at the minimum. If that's the case, if we're at 25 and somebody like Tyler Warren or Loveston from Michigan falls to us, do you draft them?
Warren, yes. So I'm like, I was talking to you before this, obviously content creator, love the Texans. I don't claim to be like a draft expert or like be like the best draft guy out there, but I think I work with a couple really good draft like analysis guys. One, Jack Sperry, another one, Tom Downey, both of those guys on Twitter. And like I'll constantly talk with them and like ask them about certain prospects. And they said like, for the top of the draft board, it's Abdul Carter, Travis Hunter, and they would put Tyler Warren as that third best player in this draft. Like he is like that talented. Like he plays the tight end spot. So obviously you're going to get tackles and other guys that go before him. But if you're just looking at like pure talent, like who's going to be the best players at their position, Warren is one of those dudes. I don't think there's any way he falls to 25. If he does, like
Well, let's just say that like he's like around like 20. Do you trade up and get him?
I mean, you only have 6 picks, so it's like he's so good. I mean, like I wouldn't be mad if they draft like how you can't be mad if your team like trades up but they draft somebody who's an absolute stud. Like if I told you like, a couple years after you're like, yeah, the Texans had to actually trade up for JJ Watt, you'd be like, good. I'm glad they did. Like that's the best move they've ever made. And I'm not saying Warren's going to be a JJ Watt level, but that dude can ball. Loveland from Michigan, that's hard for me at 25 just because, like you said, the tight end room is already kind of stacked. He had like Michigan as a whole had a down year, and he had a down year. And I was talking with one of my buddies at work today, and it kind of like guys like that. It kind of reminds me like, remember when the Texans had the first overall pick and they took Jadeveon Clowney, but it was mostly based on it was mostly based on what he did the year before he came out, right? Like he was like,
it was all based off that one highlight, baby.
yeah. Oh, I mean, it was all based on the year before he entered the draft. And I feel like a lot of people are doing that with Loveland out of Michigan. I feel like people are like, dude, like look at his numbers at this and that. And it's hard to evaluate him for this year because Michigan's like was not good. Like what did they go like 6-6 or something this year? Like they beat Ohio State, but they had like a 500 record or something like that.
Well, I guess context matters. I mean, the same thing happened with Stingley. He basically played like 3 or 4 games his last year, but like, and people at the time were like, "Oh, what a dumb pick! You got some injury guy," and like, but like, what they drafted was it showed to be true, like essential
Mhm.
and all that. So, no, I get that. I mean, shout out Mr. Optimistic. I know he's talked about that topic a lot, and
Mhm.
I think for sure, like I would definitely consider it. Like as initially, I was like, heck no. And again, too, like it's hard to say now with all these holes to fill. Like we might have a clearer picture going into the draft, but you can't help but think like Nick Caley, tight end coach, talks about how he loves tight ends, how he loves 12 personnel, 13 personnel. He talks about how he wants his tight ends to be physical blockers in the run game. And you look at our roster, and it's like, yeah, they're all good, but like have that dominant blocker. Like maybe Kate Stover is still on that trajectory, but like we don't have at the very least. I want us to sign just a big ass blocking tight end. I don't care if he can't catch for shit. We need a block. We need a blocker at tight end.
So, and I get that. Like I get where people are coming from with that, and I see engineer. You said Loveland isn't an elite pass catcher, and I get that. And maybe I'm going against what I say all the time because like I'm usually like best player available. Like you can't reach too much in the draft, especially the first couple rounds. Like whoever's at the top of your board, you should take. And if he's there, I mean, it'd be tough for me to be excited for a tight end at 25 with the other holes the Texans have.
Yeah.
And other because it's like as long as there's other guys that are around that same uh like level, I would say like at like positions of need, like if like like a Tyler Booker's there, like a guard that the Texans need, or I see like a Mecca Ibuka, like the Texans need
Mm-hmm.
another like receiving threat. Either like I think they need a traditional X receiver and a slot receiver because like I said, I don't really trust geez, we weren't that bad at 8-5. That's funny. My boss is actually a Michigan fan, so please don't tell him I said that. He'll probably be very pissed if he saw me slandering.
They beat
You,
Ohio State. I mean, that's all that matters. They beat the national champions.
that hey, he's somewhat claiming this year as a national championship for Michigan as well. So he sent me and all of us like a photo, and it was like back-to-back champs, Michigan, which was hilarious. But it would be hard for me to be like, yeah, like let's go tight end at 25 if there's like a good guard, a good wide receiver, a really good defensive lineman because we know
Yeah.
D'Amico can work wonders with these defensive linemen. If Grant out of Michigan falls to 25, or another really good defensive lineman or defensive prospect, it would be tough. It would be tough for me
Well,
to go.
another point to make too, like similar to how D'Amico can like, do more with less as far as defensive players. I mean, you talked about Tyler Higbee with Nick Caley. I mean, like
Mhm.
no one knew of this guy and now he performed a top 10 tight end. So like could that be the case? And then the one thing like that I'm like semi optimistic about with Dalton Schultz is like I know it's just press conferences and talk, but like I truly believe this when I hear Nick Caley say it. Like he will evaluate our roster as it is and what each player does good and doesn't do good. And what they don't do good, he won't try and make them do, which is what Bobby did. Hey, Dalton Schultz, go block George Karlaftis in the biggest game of the year.
Yeah.
Hey, Kate Stover, go block Jonathan Grenard, one of the best defensive in the league, in your third game in the NFL and get pancaked. He's not going to do that. He's going to put them in advantageous situations. So
Mhm.
when I think about Nick Caley in the room and with specifically Dalton Schultz, I'm thinking like, hey, just make him a glorified slot receiver. If he
Oh,
can't block, don't ask him to block.
well,
So I mean,
and because I shout out to Leo from Texans 22 because I was messaging with him earlier in today, just in one of the group chats today. But we were talking about the Texans need like a better blocking wide receiver, better blocking tight end, and dude, if you watch some film on Jack Besh from TCU,
yep.
you'll fall in love with him in round 2.
How do
Like
you
that,
pronounce his last name? By the way, I've been saying Beck in my head.
it's. I was told it was Besh. Yeah.
I might be out on him now. If it was Beck, 1,000% in. But now that I'm hearing that's how you pronounce it, I don't know.
Dude,
Nah,
yeah,
like
I may be getting punked, but I think it's Besh. But dude,
it's very close to Betch if you think about it. Put
yeah,
a little T
yeah,
in there.
Bech. I mean, maybe it's like Bech. Beh.
No, but I'm with you. Keep going. I feel the same way.
Dude, a great blocker, dude. He's massive for a wide receiver, moves really well. And I think with how Nick Caley likes to he really likes,
Insert motion.
yeah, and that, inserting it in for like run blocking, especially like having a guy in motion and then him taking the defensive end or going through the A or B gap and taking on the linebacker. I could 100% see like him filling that role of a, fullback type lead blocker out of like the slot position too. And then he can also like catch the ball out of the slot. So he's somebody who, for me, for what the Texans do, like I think he would be awesome in round 2 if the Texans don't go like a tight end or receiver in round 1.
I agree 100%. And like normally I don't like those type of receivers like that are like not quite your big X receiver like Nico as far as size and speed. They're kind of just like a possession receiver, almost kind of like Hopkins, but I guess he's a little more sturdy. But I feel like they're limited, like they don't get a lot of separation. They basically have to have strong hands and make, jump ball catches. But now like if he gets put into this system and can play that role where like we need a physical player, then he would thrive. And then also when I wrote an article and kind of dove into receivers, like I went through like slot percentage snaps. He has like a very high career slot percentage. So he played like the Z position or maybe some X too, but more outside. His slot percentage was like in the 20s, but then his career like 56. So he has the versatility too, where he can play both. So that to me, combined with, like you said, the insert motion, have him go through the B and C gap and blocking backers. And so that's the other thing too about this offense is, one, like we're assuming we're going to see something closer to the Rams offense. Like it's probably pretty likely, but the other part of it too, like I mentioned, Nick Caley, saying like basically expressing he'll be adaptable, which was the downfall of Slowick. D'Amico Ryans recognized that. So he point one interview and, will you adapt to our personnel instead of running your system no matter what? And basically it sounds like Nick Caley said yes, and he set the press conference. So with that being said, like we could run it back with the same thing and the offense could look completely different. Or now he has the ability to, like, with 2 receivers spots need to be filled, that can actually be an advantage. A coordinator, I would prefer that. I got CJ Stroud. The O-line, obviously there's struggles, but like money-wise, they're supposed to be good. And you got a freaking freak receiver in Nico Collins. There's only like 3 or 4 receivers like him, that big extra 6'4", 220, who can also run a 4.4. It's like him, AJ Brown, DK Metcalf. Like they're freaking unicorns. So when you as an OC have that on your offense, you can do. So now he gets to fill the other 2 guys with the kind of skill sets he wants. That's probably a good thing for him. So I know that I was kind of talking all over. But my point is, it's hard to kind of get what he's going to do. And I think no matter what, it'll be fine.
No, I completely agree. And I think I was reading that article that you had written the other day. Is that the one where you were talking about Cooper Kupp in it as well?
Yeah.
No, yeah, that was.
I'm high on Cooper Kupp. I know a lot of people aren't. I think that's like a perfect fit.
Oh, I mean, he worked with them for a couple of years, and I mean, if he can get back to anything close to where, dude, he was a Triple Crown winner. This dude had the most receiving yards, most receptions, most touchdowns out of everybody in a single season. Like, dude, he's good. Obviously, like he's great.
And so my big thing is, I tend to look at it very analytically as far as the receiver position, having played, for in college and training a lot. I've learned a lot about it, but like I kind of overanalyze. But I like to look at the positions. It's just like defensive tackle. There's different positions within the position, I guess. But so I look at it right now. We have 2 holes to fill. One is the slot receiver, which is what Diggs was playing. He played outside when it was 12 personnel or 2 wide receiver sets. But like when there were 3 wide receivers on the field, primary slot, like 50+% of the time he was the slot. Then we have Tank Dell's role to fill, who's injured and probably not going to play much, if at all, this year, which is the Z, the other outside receiver, who can kind of play both. They normally have about 25 to 30% of their snaps in the slot, mostly outside. And when they go to the slot, it's more so like the second slot, like in a 3-by-1 set. So anyways, like that's the way I look at it. Is like we need a slot and a Z. And so like my eyes are like free agency will dictate to us what we'll do in the draft as far as receivers. So free agency, and I kind of broke it down. I pulled people and thought about it. Like if I had to pick, and you would assume too that with the 2 wide receiver hole, we'll draft one and sign one. I don't think we'll just sign 2. We don't have the money. I don't think we'll just draft 2. It's too risky. You got 2 rookies starting for your quarterback in this this rookie contract window. So I think that logic's pretty sound, right? You sign 1, draft 1, and then the next step for me would now be, okay, would you rather sign a free agent slot receiver or sign a free agent Z receiver? The market for the Z receiver is not very good. The best one, in my opinion, is Darius Slayton, who I love. I would be happy to have him. But I feel like
at like $17-18 million a year, like that's the
problem, though. It depends on the market, right?
Mm-hmm.
I feel like he's underrated, but maybe not if that's his price tag. But on the flip side, the slot wide receiver market. I'm sorry, I know you're my guest, and we're kind of talking. I'm kind of like,
no, you're good,
I'm supposed
bro.
to be letting you talk.
Hey, cook.
Okay, yeah. So, all right, I'm cooking. So yeah, the slot receiver, I would want to sign the slot veteran, and the reasoning for me on that is a rookie. If you were to draft a rookie, I feel like they can translate more to immediate success on the outside as opposed to the inside at the Z position or X, but X is locked down. So, but the big thing from a slot receiver is like, people are like, you talk about guys like Cup or Diggs or whoever else, like, oh, he's slow, he's old. Like, that shit doesn't matter for a slot receiver. Straight line does not matter. You look at all the best slot receivers like in the history of the game out there, and you got Wes Welker, Julian Edelman, guys like that. They're not the fastest, but they're smart.
They're technicians.
They have experience. They're technicians. They know how to read a defense. They can read a blitz. They're hot. They can settle in the holes. They're tough. They make contested catches. That's why your separation numbers or contested catch rate for slot receivers is so high, is because you're in the box, a lot of traffic. So like you have to be tough, smart, and Cooper Kupp is all of that. He played it for the Rams. He played in that system. He did those same motions you're talking about from time to time, motioning in the box, blocking guy. You need to be able to block in this system like that. So that's my thing. And to me, outside of the X, I mean, slot may be more important as the 3 receiver positions because you're basically a security blanket for your quarterback. Like you can literally just not even read a defense and just throw it to your slot guy if he's enough. Whether it's man to man, he'll win, or if it's zone, he'll make the right decision. So I mean, you could literally just look down your slot receiver, and they are very important in third down situations to get first downs. They don't make the big home run plays, but they make the 5 to 7, 8, 10-yard third down plays that move the chain. So that's my logic. Sorry for my TED Talk and interrupting you.
No, dude. No, you're good. And it's actually funny because I was doing a mock draft with Texans 22 last week, and we were in that same exact conundrum because it was third round. We had taken O-line, we had taken D-line, and we were like, we want to get a receiver. And there's 2 good guys. There was Trey Harris out of Ole Miss, who's more of that outside X that you were describing. Can win on the outside, is a big body receiver, good hand.
To me, he's more like Nico. People won't like it, but like I don't think we should get him because out of the 3 positions, X is the most limited. So like to me, it doesn't make sense to have 2 X's. Z and slot are more similar and they're versatile.
So we were 50-50 on it. We were between him and then, oh dude, they're gonna kill me that I can't remember his name. The
second round receiver.
He's second, third round guy out of Iowa State.
Oh, Jalen Noel or
Higgins? Jalen Noel.
Noel is a slot.
Yes, and they wanted him over Trey Harris, and because I was the guest, obviously I got to make the pick, and we chose Trey Harris. So it looks like it was the wrong choice from
Trey Harris is a beast though, bro. Like it's like compared to DK really Metcalf potentially.
But those guys over there were so high on Noel that I went and looked at his tape, and I mean, if what you're saying is true, if what you're saying is like more important for the slot, like I think like I don't know how much you've watched on him, but maybe you watch.
I've seen him, yeah,
dude. Like he's a baller, and like maybe third round, like somebody like that could be a sneaky player to kind of fit in that role that like you were describing.
I would be happy with that. There's plenty of slot options, but like I'm just being like super picky. So like when I say like this is what I want, I'm like doesn't mean if it doesn't happen, but like I mean the guy who fits into like there's different types of slot receivers. I don't think Luther Burden's a fit in this offense. I think he's more of like a finesse. I don't want to say gadget, but like you watch his film, it's like almost all screens and like reverses. It's not like the physical. He's more of an athlete, so they kind of get him out in space. But and you got guys like Noel who's like real shifty, middle slants and whip routes and option routes. Xavier Restrepo is another third round value pick just like that. To me, he's like a Julian Edelman. Like he's that tough, savvy route runner. But the best slot is a Emeka Egbuka, and he would be a perfect fit. and him and CJ Stroud obviously had that connection. So I mean,
dude, I don't know if he'll make it to 25 is the thing, because I think some people are higher on Burden than other people. Like I've seen like a couple like Field Yates and I think it was Daniel Jeremiah both had Luther Burden. Like Field Yates had Luther Burden going to the Texans. I think Jeremiah had him going in like the 30s. I think he had him going to like the Bills. So I think some draft experts, some, people who are more in the draft community have Emeka as their, maybe 2, 3 on their, big board for wide receivers. I think everybody has T-Mac number 1. And then
yeah,
behind him, I think some people have Emeka Ibuka. Some people might have Matthew Golden. I've seen a lot of people like high and low on him, but I
yeah,
don't know. I don't know where Burden
love
falls.
Golden.
But it's funny you mentioned that about Burden too, because literally half of his tape to me, I swear he runs the same route, and I know exactly what I'm talking about, where it's motion into like a wheel route on the outside.
He just stands there as a screen and then just waits and then gets it. But like he was running some deep routes and stuff too. But I mean, like somebody had posted like a 40-minute video. I watched like almost all of it, like every touch of the entire season. I was like, dude, like this is not like he's a good athlete, but it's like, and maybe that's not his fault, but like I just didn't see a skill set that best fit what we need is, like we talked about how like we need bigger physical guys. And so like funny though, surface level, like you're like, oh, it's fastest. Oh, we need the fastest guy. Like, no, you don't necessarily need the fastest guy.
Yeah,
But,
I mean, and that's exactly what like we got Tank Dell in the 3rd round, and he was not the fastest guy. He was not, the strongest or anything like that. But I think he was a smart football player, and like you said, kind of played that role very well, and was very smart of like knowing where to sit, and was like a good, especially that rookie season, that connection with him and Stroud, like it was just like so automatic. Like he would sit and Stroud would hit him right there. Like they had such a good like feel for each other that it was almost not unguardable, but like really hard because they were so in sync that rookie season.
it still blows my mind how he was non-existent this year. Like what changed? Like, was a little bit like his, skills gone from recovering from injury.
Yeah,
I don't know what you think. I have a couple thoughts on that, but
I think it was probably a little bit of coming back from injury. Like, if anybody who's ever gotten injured before, and those first couple of times you're back in the gym or doing whatever, you especially if you injure your knee, like when you cut, it's like not the same usually, or it's hard to get back to that same level of like cut quickness and everything like that. And I do think it partly also has to do with the fact that the whole offense like regressed,
yeah.
right? Like Stroud was hitting the ground more. He had less time to throw the ball. Like it was like the whole offense, like the passing game, everything just looked like it took a big step backwards. Like I swear if we didn't get like Joe Mixon's so undervalued. If we didn't get Joe Mixon, this offense might have been like even worse in the NFL, because everybody's like, oh, the Texans actually not a bad like rushing team. And I'm like, dude, no, Joe Mixon would make like 4 dudes miss in the backfield and would like run for 30 yards. But the O-line was not doing him any favors this year. Like the only run that I can remember where he didn't get touched and was able to run free was that run in the Dallas game.
Yeah. Well, you know what's crazy though is like I had thought about that too. It's like CJ Stroud and Joe Mixon both did the same thing. The O line was terrible in pass pro, so CJ Stroud would just flush and make a play.
Mm-hmm.
The O line was terrible in run blocking, and Joe Mixon would just flush and make a play. That was our whole offense. It was 2 guys balling the fuck out, making the best out of a bad situation. And I think that's why Tank Dell didn't get the targets. Like when I dove in, like on the receiver article, like ADOT and time to throw and all this stuff is like basically Stroud was like pressured like over 30, like 30+%, whatever it was. And you can't run your full route if the quarterback is out of the pocket. So like you never got to see him run those actual routes. That's kind of what I think tend to happen. It was just sad to see. But engineer, this is a great point here. He says, I don't know if you throw a dominant tight end in that slot role, you can have whatever wide receiver you want to complement the receiver. Yeah, I mean that's kind of what I was saying with Dalton Schultz. Like make him like the big slot. That's intriguing. I like that.
I think engineer might also be like kind of going on the role of like, I think he put in earlier of like something about like Brock Bowers and like Bowers is a tight end, but he's also kind of like a receiver, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
he's like, if Bowers was in this Texans offense, like, and he was categorized as a receiver, like I think he would still have a ton of success and be like one of the best receivers in the NFL. Like I could see the argument too. Like maybe I have to dive more in on Loveland and a couple other of these guys because maybe you do take somebody who's a receiver or not a receiver, a tight end in the draft and kind of transform them into this like slot,
That's a
extra
great
receiver
point. A
guy.
tweener type guy. Yeah.
Mhm.
That's a really good point. And that's again, this is like why this is so interesting. One, the amount of like holes we have to fill, and two, like the mysterious part, like we really don't know what's gonna happen. So like that's why I can't wait till like the first move to kind of see what direction he envisions this offense.
Yeah, I am interested in that, and I'm excited that the Texans at least will have some wiggle room with the cap. Like that news that happened today of basically all these NFL teams. I think it's around like 7, 8, or $9 million more than what they had expected. So instead of
Mhm.
being under the cap, the Texans are actually 7 million over the cap.
Mhm.
Which I guess those are rough estimates. I saw it on Twitter from I think it was like Texans cap. I can't remember.
Texans cap. Yeah, so basically, when I saw like the 20 to 24 million, whatever, like I just assumed his projections, it would be on top of that, but he had already factored in what he thought it was going to be. So basically it went from like 4 million to 7 million, but he used the low side. So I think it could be like 7 to like 11 million based off
Yeah.
of that, depending on how much they increase it.
Which is nice that the Texans don't have to make like crazy drastic moves to do anything and for like they still have a little bit to like work with in free agency at least, but I you also have to consider and factor in like who are the Texans going to bring back, because I think the Texans have a lot of like free agents who were older guys who contributed, and I do wonder how much the Texans want to run it back with some of the like I was talking with the D line guys like Mario Edwards Jr., Derek Barnett, Foley Futakasi, some more unknown guys like Neville Hewitt, who was Frank Ross's favorite player on the team, like
Yeah.
one of our best special teamers. He's a free agent, and
Yeah.
I saw you talking about it like last week of like he might want to go somewhere else and start, which would be a
Mhm.
big blow to our special teams unit because he was one of the best players out there, and you can also win and lose games on special teams. Like it's less common, but
And
that's
we
another
lost
phase
the
of the
Chiefs
game.
game because of special teams, I believe.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there you go.
Biggest game of the year.
Yeah.
But,
So
like, to counter that, like, I would say, like, I guess it's gonna happen. Like, you obviously wanna keep as much of those guys as you can. Like, the reason I wouldn't feel as bad if we were to lose guys like that is, like, our coaching. Like, I feel good about our coaching. I feel good about D'Amico Ryans. Like you just mentioned, we talked about all these no-name D linemen we got. They're, like, household names for us at least. If we
mhm.
were to lose them, he may be looking at, like, "Okay, I'm gonna go find the next value guy." Oh, Kim Settle, like, that's the thing too is, like, you kinda rejuvenate guys' careers. They come here and thrive in your system, and then now, if they're free agents, their price just went up like as a result because you made them look better. So then it's like, now do I overpay this guy or can I go find that guy to do the same thing and flip it over? Like Blake Cashman was the same way, like we made him and then he was too much and let him go. And now you get it's kind of
Mhm.
like a farm system I don't know.
Yeah. No, yeah, I get that too. I get that of like, and we talk about scouting all the time in college, like, college scouting, scouting other, prospects. But I think the Texans this past year did a really good job in scouting, free agents of like you
Hmm.
said, like those lower level guys who we were like, oh yeah, like it's not a big deal. Like I said, like, I made a video on Tim Settle last year and nobody cared. Like nobody, everybody was
Yeah.
like, who? Like, okay, cool. Like I literally got a comment that was like, because I was like, "Oh, Texans add to the defensive line." And I got a comment that was like, "Oh, dude, you're clickbaiting. This isn't anything for the D line. Like this guy,
That's
like, why are
crazy.
you even making this video? Like this sucks." Like, and now we're all like, "Dang, like Tim Settle's pretty good."
So hopefully us as fans will like learn, like, because we're still becoming contenders, like as fans we're kind of learning how to like observe these things. But I mean, I'm
Mhm.
excited, I'm sure you are too, like, so I plan on like writing articles for like each like position group. I don't know if I'll do it before free agency to like address it and go through names. But like at receiver, I mean, there's value names like Denard Robinson, like, he's has familiarity, but like I could see somewhere like him coming in on a cheap deal and then like him overperforming his contract. But defensive line, I can't wait now to go through the free agents of like the bottom of the barrel and find that next gem for us, because they're going to find one.
Oh, dude, yeah. And actually, the one I will give a little, pat on the back is whenever they signed Foley Fudakasi to that 1-year deal, I kind of looked into him and like his role and what the Texans need, because it was I believe it was after they signed Danico Autry, and it's like he's not a true DT, he's more of a tweener, like plays the 3 tech, plays outside as well. And then whenever I looked into Foley Fudakasi, he is just a brick wall. He is a stout human being.
That nose tackle.
And I was like, dude, he's going to be perfect on the interior. Like, he's not going to maybe get, and like, if you look at his stats this year, like he did miss some time for injury, and if you look at his stats, you're like, I don't think he did that much, but like, he was like just
Well, run stopping. I mean, you saw, when he was out late in the year and then when he came back, our run defense was terrible and then it was good again.
Oh,
Like,
dude, he was plugging, and it makes the linebackers look better because he's eating up 2 blocks, and you have Toto being able to, shoot the gap and get a tackle for loss, or Azeez Al-Shire, like read which gap, which hole the running back's going to choose, and he can easily go and try to tackle him. Like, I think those things get like, it's like, whenever I played basketball in high school, I was big on like the backdoor screen, like, or like the screen on the outside, and the dude would get an open layup, and you're never going to get a stat for a screen that leads to an open layup.
Yeah.
I mean, it almost should be, right? Like, you should get
Yeah.
like a hockey has like an assist for an assist. Like, that's almost like what a defensive tackle should get for a play like that. Like, he holds up the guard and center, and then somebody else gets to play, and we're all like, Toto's a beast. He's awesome. But also, like, Foley Fudakasi was putting in work on the inside. No diddy.
And to our point earlier, like FF may see that and like penalize him, but it's actually like that's what he was told to do.
Yeah.
I'm gonna check in with you. I know you said an hour. It's been an hour. Do you want to keep going, or you got a couple minutes, or?
Let's give it like 10. Let's give it like 10 more minutes.
Okay, cool. I think that surprisingly went by a lot quicker than I thought.
Dude, I didn't even notice until you just said that.
This has been like straight off the rip, like all just genuine stuff. Like I'll kind of have like an outline and think of stuff, but I was like, Jeremy, like he's chill, like we'll just kind of shit. So,
oh, dude, yeah.
And I feel like we've been talking for 10 minutes. It's been an hour.
We're all just chilling at the bar. We're a couple beers deep. We're like, dude, the Texans should be doing this, man.
Yeah, no, I love it, man. But yeah, so man, I had a thought on something. Yeah, so I've used that. Like I talked about the different position types of receivers. Like the defensive tackle is the same way. Like your nose tackle or 0 or 1 tech is different than your 3 tech. Like a pass rushing one and a run stopping one. So that's something to think about too. Like when we need a tackle, you need to say, okay, which type of tackle do we need? And so as of now, without Foley, we need that nose tackle, that big guy, that run stopper. So to me, this is another like indicator for the draft. If we don't re-sign Foley or another bigger build guy that's good against the run, then that tells me, hey, look out for us drafting a nose in the draft. So I mean, I feel like there's that you can kind of look into to figure out what may or may not happen. So
that's why I know, like, we were talking about earlier, that Grant kid from Michigan, like he might, like if they draft him at 25, like people are going to be pumped, and then like his rookie season, the numbers might not show it as much, and it's just like, and I loved him last year. I wish the Texans got him, and it sucks he plays for the Titans, but Tavondre Sweat is he didn't have great numbers his rookie season, or numbers where you're like, dude, he dominated. But if you look at any of like the film, if you watch that Texans game up against the Titans where they came down to Houston and they whooped our butts, like, dude, he was absolutely working the Texans D-line in that game.
Yep. No, I agree. And then like the Eagles, I mean, they have several nose tackles. They have the big names, but like their stats weren't crazy. And like Milton Williams is an example. I think he's that nose tackle, that big run stopper, but he had a couple sacks in the Super Bowl. So now people know about, like, he was a name that was underrated all year. So that's an exciting part for me. I guess like as we kind of wind down, if you had to say like, some top guys in the draft that you would want to see become Houston Texans, who would those guys be?
Ooh, we were talking about the kid from TCU earlier. I do like,
Jack Bet.
yeah, I like,
I'm gonna start calling him that.
I like Booker out of Alabama. I think, he would fill a need at that guard spot, and we know D'Amico has a hard on for Alabama players. So
Yep.
the fit is there right
And
there,
Casario.
25. Um, you know, I I'm kind of, getting talked more into a guy like Noel from Iowa State on the defensive side. Somebody who I looked more into. I really like Andrew Makuba out of Texas. I think he's a great safety, has great instincts, played for two really good schools and had production at both of them, at Clemson and at Texas. And biggest times, like whenever they needed him, he made really big plays for Texas, like in the college football playoff and stuff like that. Another guy who's a freak athlete and would really interest me of pairing him with Kalen Bullock is Nick Emanwari from SC State, from South Carolina. He's like
Okay.
6'3", 220, can fly around the football field. Like, not comparing him to like a Cam Chancellor, but like a big dude who can like bring the hit stick. And the idea of having like a guy like that who just like absolutely like brings the thunder, and then Kalen Bullock on the backside just like getting like 5-6 picks a season, that really intrigues me, of kind of like almost like that Legion of Boom dynamic of like an Earl Thomas getting all the picks, and then like the Cam Chancellor. Not saying those are like the comparisons of those guys,
Yeah.
but like,
Well, you're talking about style, and I agree. And I've been thinking about this too. Like, Kalen Bullock is your free safety. He's more of the coverage guy. And then we need a strong safety who's kind of both. Like right now it's Jimmy Ward, but he's best suited at the nickel star position, which is what Petrie plays. So when he does play high safety, it's kind of like he's stuck in no man's land. I agree. Like if we had to be really, picky on like filling out the whole defense, having like a legit strong safety would like make that defense just
do you remember when we had Danielle Manning and
yeah.
then Bernard Pollard on the other
Yep.
side? And Pollard was just like, he was like literally every game just hit stick, hit stick, hit stick.
He was a dog, dude.
Oh, dude, that was a sneaky Texan. One of my favorite players was Bernard Pollard, because I think he would get
He would
kicked
talk
out.
a lot of shit too.
He would get kicked out of most games. Like him and Brian Cushing would not be able to play in the NFL today. Like they'd be fine like every other game. Like it'd be like what Aziz Al-Shire happened this year, but like times 1,000 with those two guys, because those dudes had no, like reckless abandon, like did not care about their bodies. Like they were just like jumping like head first, like they no care at all.
He was an enforcer. I feel like I went to some like a couple of like private practice and something, but like I remember like watching him in person. Like this guy is a bad motherfucker.
Dude,
Like
scary. Scary.
Yeah.
But what were we talking about? Oh, the draft.
Yeah.
Something that I need to look more into is cornerback, because we talked about secondary, we talked about the cornerback depth. I think it's like a Zira Thomas or something from Florida State, that second, third round range for a cornerback. Like I wouldn't mind the Texans adding either maybe somebody in free agency or somebody in the draft at corner, just because like I feel like the Texans still need that depth. And even though you have Lassiter and Stingley, like, teams like the Philadelphia Eagles have like, 3-4 legit receiving weapons, receiving threats. And, the more corners you can have, the more guys that you can have that can cover, the better. Especially if, we learned the hard way this year, if like Lassiter or Stingley get hurt, then you're like, well, dang, who's playing on the outside now? Like Kadar Holman starting or D'Angelo Ross? Like that doesn't give me a lot of hope.
Yeah, I agree. I think that is an underrated position that I've kind of been overlooking too. Like maybe find some value like in the mid to late rounds there. Yeah, that's a tough one. I guess, a couple more minutes. So we'll just give you one more question and we'll finish up there. If you could only sign one free agent, who would it be?
Ooh.
You can take your time. I know I'm putting you on the spot.
No, that's good.
And if I guess, do you want me to like make it realistic or not realistic?
I'll do it somewhat realistic, because now the Texans have a little bit of wiggle room. And this might change how the Texans draft. And I kind of like the idea of doing this just because the Texans haven't hit on offensive linemen in the draft. Really, they really haven't. I not that I don't trust them to evaluate talent, but they just haven't shown me. Like, I feel like everybody they've drafted has not panned out. Like Kenyon Green, like Blake Fisher, the jury's still out. Like he, was not bad this past year. Was like I would say most Texans fans are like meh on Blake Fisher. Like he was good, and then he also struggled a little bit. But in free agency, if we can get somebody for the offensive line, and I really like the idea of going out and getting a James Daniels from the Pittsburgh Steelers, was injured this year, wasn't able to play, so there's a little bit of risk factor there. But you could sign him for hopefully like under $10 million because everybody's talking about Trey Smith at $20 million a year. Like, come on, dude! Like
that's insane for a guard, dude.
No, dude, the Texans, like.
You got Tunsil at like what 28, and then you would have a guard at 20.
For everybody in here who's like, you can't say like you want Trey Smith and then also be like, Danica Watry and Christian Harris are untouchable. Like if you're going out and getting Trey Smith, those dudes are out the window. You're like, we're trying to clear some money to, pay for Trey Smith. So I think James Daniels is a, decent option for the Texans. I think he would be solidify that right guard spot for you. You can move on from Shaq Mason, and I think that would be a great option for the Texans to go out and get of maybe a little bit of a risk guy, but at the same time, the reward if he hits, he's proven that he can play in the league. He's been a really good offensive lineman. Whenever he was in Chicago, he wasn't bad. Whenever he was in Pittsburgh, he was a really good run blocker, a really good pass block. I would say before, we talked about PFF grades. Before he got hurt, he was the second rated guard by PFF through, I think, the first 5 or 6 weeks. Like he's really good.
And what was his injury? Did you say, or do you know what it was?
I want to say
but he should be fine going into this year, I guess is my question.
Yeah, because he got hurt early on as well. I want to say it was a lower body injury, but let me use so I hadn't really dove in yet until I saw your video. He tore his Achilles in week 4, so obviously not pretty right there, right? Like you're like, oh
yeah,
but
he's a lineman though. You don't need Achilles.
Dude, yeah. Well, also he's also, for how long he's been in the NFL, he's sneaky young. Oh, my boy Connor's in. Need to upgrade that O-line, or we junior slumps. Yeah. I think James Daniels is still 26 or 27. Like he's still young. Like he's
less of a risk too. Like let's just say it doesn't work out. You're not just fully committed to this guy.
Yeah.
And I hate to say, I'm actually going to work on the piece this week for the O-line. I'm going to talk about the current status and where we should go. But I personally don't think the situation is as bad as people think. I feel during the middle of the year, it was the worst, or and I think it got better later. So, I think between that, the progress we saw end of the year, and then now with the new system and new coach, O-line coach, OC, I'm preparing myself for not a lot of change. I'm still optimistic that it can work. But I don't know.
It's tough. And I mean, and there is, a point to be made of what did Nick Haley say was his biggest inspiration coming in, to coaching was Scarnecchia. And who on this offensive line has ties to that regime? Shaq Mason at right guard. He played for the Patriots before. So maybe he comes in and is able to, unknown thanks for that. He's 27 now. So yeah, not bad. Maybe he's able to come in and fix Shaq Mason. Cause dude, that's the thing of some Texans fans also think Shaq Mason has sucked his entire time with the Texans. I don't think that's true. Shaq Mason wasn't bad.
He's been great.
Traded for him.
This year was that was, to me, that was the biggest thing with the offense this year was the sudden disappearance of Shaq Mason and the sudden disappearance of Dalton Schultz. To me, those two things is what the hell just happened? He was the old reliable vet at right guard. Don't worry about him, we're good. And then all of a sudden now he's this massive liability.
and we were like, oh, dude, Titus Howard, he played awesome at right tackle only. He just got this contract extension. Let's go. And I do have to say, I've been hard on Also pause on that. On Titus Howard, in the past, like I've been very, very critical of him, but I do have to give him kudos for honestly, he is a team first guy. Like he wants to only play right tackle. Like that is
he put it in his freaking Twitter bio.
Yeah. If he had it,
and that's because he wants to get paid too. That's what it is.
Exactly. He would not go anywhere else. But when the rubber met the road and the Texans needed it, he was like, "I'll move to left guard. I'll do what the team needs." And the O-line took.
I agree.
There was baby steps, but I feel like the O-line took some steps forward whenever they moved him to left guard and then Blake Fisher to right tackle, and then you had Jarrett Patterson at center and
Scruggs
Mason
at right guard.
Mason, and then it was Scruggs at right guard.
Yeah,
I feel like they did a little bit better.
Yeah, and that's why, the decision to start Shaq Mason over Scruggs against Kansas City was crazy to me, and that's where I'm kind of concerned. But I agree 1,000%, dude, with Titus Howard. People argue oh, how is that selfless? Of course he should do it. It's his job. Nah, these players in the NFL can choose not to do that. That was pretty. It's if you think about it from a money perspective, he could have potentially lost himself money by going from a more premier position to a less premier one. But yeah, I think he does deserve credit for that. I agree. And I like that iteration of the O-line. I think Titus should be the left guard. And now it's just figuring out right guard, really, honestly. And we have worst comes to worst, some potential options in-house, a new guy.
We battle at training camp. It's Scruggs, Patterson, all out battle, winner takes all for the center position.
Love it.
Okay, I know this is this is your channel, this is your show. It's a different kind of show today. Obviously, we're just chilling.
Yeah.
I want to finish on this. I want to ask you a question.
Let's go. Let's get it.
Nothing to do with the Texans at all.
Okay.
We were debating it in the office yesterday. If I handed you a bowl with 100 jelly beans and every single one that you ate, you get $100,000, but one jelly bean in that bowl kills you, how many are you eating?
Wow. So you 1% chance of dying, which gets more and more. This is like some Squid Game shit.
Right? Right. I said I'm a win.
100,000?
Yeah, 100,000.
Say none, dude. Fuck that.
I said none. And
yeah, I'm not eating any, dude. My life ain't worth $100,000.
They were like, what if it was $1 million a bean? I was like, they were like, dude, you wouldn't eat a couple? I was like, no way.
I guess if you can put it into other if you can relate to okay, what's your chance of drive your car? If that's around 1%, if I could find some numbers like that to justify it, then I might do it.
You're talking yourself into eating a jelly bean right now.
Well, everything's got a price on it, right?
You're like, dude, you
that reminds me of an inappropriate joke. I won't say it, but
but dude, yeah.
No, 5. That's a great question. That's tough.
Texans 22 says 5.
5? Wow.
Dude,
you must not value your life that much, VT, man. Damn.
I had people in the office. They were like, dude, you got to risk it to the biscuit, man. I'd at least 10. I'm like, dude, that each
hell
one,
no.
I would be like,
I wouldn't eat a single one, dude.
No.
Fuck that.
No, bro. I'm like,
well, but too, decide to eat that first one. You're kind of like, okay, you get a little cocky and confident, and then it's going to be hard to stop. The next thing you know, you're gambling. Eating 20. Yes, exactly.
And I did.
Which reminds me of Squid Games. You get greedy. They could have got out of it and they want to keep going.
Exactly. And it's me and my wife were just watching Beast Games on Amazon Prime. Great, not a sponsor, obviously, great show. It was really cool with Mr. Beast. At the beginning of the show, he's like, "Hey, if you want to get out right now, $50,000." Me and my wife were like, "Dude, I'm taking that. $50,000 now. I can just go. Yeah, dude, I'm taking that." And then some people were like, "No way, I'm going for the $5 million. I'm going for the $5 million." I'm like, maybe I'm not a risk taker. Maybe I'm too conservative. I was like, dude, I'll just take that. I'm good with that.
I think I align with you on some of this stuff. I will do the same thing.
Yeah, and
sure.
With the jelly beans, I was like, no way. I'm zero beans.
Yeah, that's ludicrous, man. What if you change the context and say, okay, now it's a gun with 100 bullets in it? If you make it more of a vulgar, does that change people's perception? But it's the same thing, Yeah,
maybe. I don't know. And it's funny because the guys who love sports betting in our office were like, yeah, like I feel like they were all like higher numbers. They're like, honestly, when you look at the odds of like everything, like I feel like all the guys who were
Can I
like
like parlay with another one and get like twice?
it's like, yeah, if I eat these jelly beans and I have the gun, like
What about 1.5? That's funny.
do I get 50,000 if I just eat half the bean or but
Gets injured before the game. Do you cancel the bet?
oh dude. I love me and my wife always play like the would you rather, or like would you press the button, or like stuff like that, like random questions like that. So that's one of my favorite things to ask, of like something random like
That's
that.
cool.
'Cause it's like it's
Yeah.
like it is like a moral conundrum of like, damn, like what would I do?
Yeah, well, it gets you thinking, man. That's like a thought-provoking question. I like that. And that was a great question. But yeah, I've enjoyed it, Jeremy. I mean, I appreciate you coming on. You know, as I mentioned, like I have a lot of respect for what you do. A big fan of your channel and all your. If you want to go ahead and plug everything you got right now before we get off.
Dude, yeah, you can follow me at Jeremy Chugs on Twitter. Texans Today on YouTube, Chat Sports. Check me out. I do daily videos there, doing the latest news and rumors. If you or anybody you know has, somebody who's not a Texans fan, just search team name Chat Sports. One of our channels will more than likely pop up. Work with a ton of great dudes there at Chat Sports, and we're trying to, be like, daily content on YouTube for whatever channel or whatever team you enjoy. I'm lucky enough to cover, the best team, the Houston Texans, obviously. So obviously go check out my channel, Texans Today. But dude, yeah, and I will say Texans fans are, they have it so good. They don't even know, with the amount of content creators and guys on Twitter and guys, who are, just focused on like covering the team, like your articles, Texans 22. I know Ruben does an awesome job. The guys over at 610, like Texans fans have a lot, and it's like we're a young fan base, but Texans are fans whenever they're good, whenever this team is off the ground. Like we are a passionate fan base, and we have a lot of people in our corner. So like I implore you, like go check it out, like go check out all the channels, like become a more knowledgeable fan, and like also like you're able to kind of like build like a community. Like I feel like Texans Today, like my YouTube is a community. Like whenever I'm like on Twitter and like I'm in like a group chat with you or whoever, like I feel like I'm like part of more of like a community. And that's what sports is all about. It's about bringing people together. That's my favorite. That's why I love sports. That's why I think sports are some of the best things in the world, because no matter what's going on outside, no matter whatever, sports brings everybody together. And that's something that I love. And that's something that I think, everybody should cherish, of like community, having people around, like having a community of people who are like, all, together for one cause, for one team, the Houston Texans. And that's why, I think Texans fans are super lucky to have all these different avenues to find that. Like with this channel right here, Stressans, my guy.
That's an awesome message, man. And that's one that I, preach a lot too. Like I'm, just over a year into doing this. Like I've always been a fan in the shadows, but like actively being involved. And that is my favorite part about all of this is like, I call them friends. Like I've made a lot of friends. Like, you interact and talk to these people consistently on a daily basis. So, I mean, I love it, man. I agree with that message 1,000%. Not only are we lucky to have people like you and I and other content creators, but great fans to interact with. So, and we're just waiting for that Super Bowl, man. It's going to be even better when that happens.
It's going to be so sweet. It's going to be so sweet. We're popping champagne. Me and Stressans are getting bottles of champagne whenever the Texans win the Super Bowl, and we're popping them off. 100%.
Facts. On a live stream, we'll do it.
Heck yeah. All right, man.
No doubt. Yeah, appreciate you coming on. As always, guys, check out the site. That's all we got. I'll just end it here, Jeremy. We can stay on for a second, and I can send you off from there. But everyone, thanks for tuning in, and we will.